Hi, friends, it's Pastor John, and I'm here to bring you this week's Midweek Devotional. I'm basing what I want to say on this past Sunday's worship, the conclusion of our series, I Promise, and the fifth vow of membership in the United Methodist Church, which is witness. We promise to uphold the church with our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness, to participate in the ministry of Jesus Christ in those ways. And we remembered the witness of the saints of Christ Church on All Saints Sunday, and we continue to make our promises, our vows, to be faithful to God in these ways in which we practice our faith. There's something specific that I'd like to talk to you about witness, and it's a little bit of a personal testimonial in a sense, a way that I felt like I was convicted about my idea of what it meant to witness, and what it meant to be a faithful Christian, because I realized a few years ago that many of the things that I had always believed a person should do, many of the things that I tried to practice in my life, many times falling short, but those things like goodness and kindness and love and love your neighbor and be patient, all of those wonderful gifts of the Spirit, those things that display God's presence to people. I realized that I kind of had an idea that if I did those things, that the people who received them should give those things back to me. And of course, you might think about what Jesus said. What did Jesus say? The golden rule is to love others as you would like to be loved. To treat others, to do that kind of thing. You don't have to be a Christian to embrace the truth of that statement. But I think I always assumed that people would do those things. If I was kind enough, if I was loving enough, if I was patient enough. And again, I want to remember that I fall short of all of those goals on a regular basis. But I think that I always thought that if I did those things, that it would immediately, or maybe not even immediately, but it would inspire people to embrace those ideals for themselves, and that I would receive that back. And what I realized over time was that was sort of calculating. It was almost like an investment plan. If I do this, then you will return it back for me. And one of the things that I've learned from the testimony of the scriptures is that God has transformed the idea of covenant. Back in the days when Abram was approached by God to make a covenant, and God made these promises to Abram. They went through this covenant-making ceremony. You can look it up. It's in the book of Genesis, and it is this really strange, bizarre ritual. I'm not going to tell you the details. To be honest with you, they're pretty gruesome. But what happens in the covenant-making ritual in those days was that the two parties would walk between the halves of animals that had been cut apart. And both of the parties would walk together between the halves of the animals. And the implication was that if either of them gave up on that if one of them turned their back on that, then they would receive that same kind of treatment. It was like a contract. So when God makes this promise with Abram, God puts Abram into a deep sleep, and God walks between the halves of the animals without Abram. Now the implication there is that God has made a covenant with us that isn't dependent upon whether we also make the covenant with God. Now, absolutely, God hopes that we will make a covenant. And God knows something about us too. that unless we are willing to make these promises, we will never really be the people that God has created us to be. But it's not an investment plan. And so when we make a covenant to love our neighbors, to be patient and kind, to serve one another, to do all of these things that are expressions of our love for God, we can't really expect them to return those things. And one of the aspects of our witness, one of the ways that we can transform the world, is to make a promise to do these things whether or not they are returned to us. We cannot give up on who we are as God's people just because we aren't receiving the same kind of treatment in return. You can see what happened with Jesus, right? But he loved the people, even those who treated him the way that they did. And friends, if we want this world to be any different, we must hear that same call. Amen.